Story outline: Hearts Across the Void Part 1. The Translator's Gambit character, Elena Vasquez, a linguistic xenobiologist who discovers her murdered parents were part of a secret resistance. When alien slavers attack her research station, she uses her knowledge of their language to turn their own warriors against them. Part 2. The Engineer's Revenge character, Marcus Chen, a starship engineer, whose sister was executed by the hegemony. He infiltrates their fleet by posing as a maintenance worker and systematically sabotages their most advanced vessels from within. Part 3. The Pilot's Defiance character, Zara Okafor, a cargo pilot, whose brother was killed in the initial invasion. She leads a desperate mission to steal hegemony technology, but finds herself unexpectedly drawn to an enemy ace pilot who questions his own empire's methods. Part 4. The Scientist's Discovery character, David Reyes, a quantum physicist who loses his wife to hegemony experimentation. He develops a weapon that could destroy their entire fleet, but hesitates when he falls for a captured enemy scientist who shares his passion for discovery. Part 5. The Ambassador's Choice character, Amira Hassan, a former diplomat who becomes humanity's unlikely representative when the hegemony finally agrees to negotiate. She must choose between vengeance for humanity's losses and a chance at peace with the alien prince, who has begun to question everything he was taught. Part 1. The Translator's Gambit. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal of the observation deck's viewport, watching the binary stars of the Kepler system paint streaks of amber and crimson across the research station's hull. 3 years of isolation on Research Station Theta had given her plenty of time to perfect her translations of the Zephyrian language, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the stars seemed to whisper warnings she couldn't quite decipher. The communication ray crackled to life behind her, and Elena turned to see her research partner, James Wright, hunched over the control console. His weathered face was illuminated by the soft blue glow of the displays. Deep lines of concentration etched around his eyes. "Elena, you need to hear this," he said, his voice tight with concern. "I've been monitoring deep space channels, and there's chatter about a hegemony patrol fleet moving through this sector." Elena's blood chilled. The draconian hegemony, a vast empire of reptilian humanoids, who had been systematically conquering human colonies for the past 5 years. Their brutal efficiency was legendary, and their treatment of prisoners was the stuff of nightmares. "How close?" she asked, moving to join him at the console. "Close enough that we should start thinking about evacuation protocols," James replied, adjusting the frequency filters. "But that's not the strangest part. Listen to this." The speakers crackled with alien voices speaking in the harsh, guttural tones of High Draconian. Elena's trained ear immediately began parsing the complex grammatical structures, her mind automatically translating the rapid-fire exchanges. "Seize the research facility, valuable intelligence assets, priority capture of the translator." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "They know about me." "Impossible," James said, but his expression suggested he was already considering the implications. "Your work is classified. The only people who know about your linguistic abilities are dead." Elena finished quietly. "My parents were part of the resistance, James. They were executed 6 months ago for crimes against the hegemony. Someone must have talked." The weight of that revelation settled between them like a lead blanket. Elena's parents, Dr. Maria and Professor Carlos Vasquez, had been renowned xenobiologists who had publicly opposed the hegemony's expansion. Their execution had been broadcast across human space. As a warning to other potential dissidents, "Elena," James said softly, "there's something else. I've been analyzing the linguistic patterns in these transmissions, and I think some of these draconian soldiers aren't entirely loyal to their cause." She frowned, focusing more intently on the alien voices. Years of studying draconian culture had taught her to recognize subtle emotional undertones in their speech patterns, and James was right, there was something there. Doubt, uncertainty, even traces of what might be called guilt. "The younger voices," she murmured, "they're using informal contractions, dropping honorifics when they think their superiors aren't listening. That's not just casual speech, it's borderline rebellious in draconian military culture." Before James could respond, the station's proximity alarms began wailing. Red warning lights bathed the observation deck in an ominous glow as the automated systems announced the arrival of multiple unidentified vessels. "They're here," Elena said, her mind racing. "James, get to the escape pods. I'm going to try something." "What, Elena?" "We need to leave now." She was already moving toward the communication array, her fingers flying over the controls as she opened a channel to the approaching fleet. "Trust me, and if this doesn't work, tell Earth that the Vasquez family kept fighting until the end." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a hegemony warship. The creature that appeared was typical of Draconian nobility, 7 feet tall, covered in iridescent scales that shifted from deep green to midnight black, with piercing golden eyes that seemed to burn with predatory intelligence. Ceremonial scarring covered his arms and chest, marking him as a veteran of countless campaigns. "I am Battle Leader Krex of the Crimson Talon," the alien announced in accented English. "You will surrender immediately and prepare for interrogation." Elena took a deep breath and responded in perfect High Draconian, her pronunciation so flawless that she saw several of the bridge crew exchange surprised glances. "Honored Battle Leader," she said, using the formal address reserved for respected enemies. "I am Elena Vasquez, daughter of the executed resistance leaders. I know you seek me for my knowledge of your language, but I offer you something far more valuable." Krex's golden eyes narrowed. "Speak quickly, human. My patience wears thin." "I have been monitoring your communications," Elena continued, switching to a more intimate register of Draconian that implied shared secrets. "Your young warriors speak with divided hearts. They question the wisdom of endless conquest, the honor in destroying entire worlds. You lead soldiers who no longer believe in the cause they die for." The bridge fell silent. Elena could see the muscle in Krex's jaw tightening as he processed her words. She was gambling everything on her understanding of Draconian psychology there. Intense focus on honor, loyalty, and the bonds between warriors. "You speak dangerous words," Krex said finally, but his voice lacked the confident menace of moments before. "I speak true words," Elena replied, "and I can prove it. Battle Leader, do you remember the siege of Proxima when your lieutenant, young Vex, hesitated before executing the human children?" Krex's scales darkened, a clear sign of emotional distress in his species. "How could you possibly know?" "Because he spoke of it in his personal logs, which your intelligence division captured but never properly translated. He used the phrase Zikhan Talar, the weight of necessary evil. But that's not what he meant, was it? In the old tongue, the tongue your empire tries to forget, Zikhan Talar means the burden of choosing darkness when light calls to you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Elena had just accused the hegemony's military of systematically mistranslating their own soldiers' reports, of willfully ignoring signs of dissent and moral conflict within their ranks. "Battle Leader," called a younger voice from off-screen. Elena's trained ear immediately identified the speaker as one of the conflicted soldiers she'd heard earlier. She speaks the old words my grandmother used to tell stories." "Silence," Krex barked, but Elena saw the uncertainty flickering in his golden eyes. This was her moment. Elena stepped closer to the screen, her voice dropping to the intimate tones reserved for warriors sharing battlefield truths. "Your young lieutenant stands behind you now, doesn't he? Ask him about his grandmother's stories. Ask him if he remembers the words she used to describe warriors who fought without honor. Ask him if he still believes the humans are the monsters in this war." Krex turned slowly, and Elena saw his expression change as he looked at someone beyond the camera's range. When he faced the screen again, his demeanor had shifted completely. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: doubt. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. Elena's heart raced as she realized her gambit was working. "I propose a conversation. Not interrogation, conversation. Bring your lieutenant and any other warriors who remember their grandmother's stories. Let them hear what I've learned about your language, your culture, your history. Let them decide for themselves whether the path your empire has chosen is truly the path of honor. And if they decide you speak lies, then you'll have lost nothing but time. But if they decide I speak truth," Elena paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Then perhaps it's time for the hegemony to remember what it means to be honorable warriors, rather than conquerors of worlds, behind cracks. Elena could hear whispered conversations in rapid Draconian. The young voices were excited, speaking in dialects that predated the Empire's official language, the kind of speech patterns that suggested deep cultural memory and ancestral wisdom. Very well, Krex said finally. But understand this, daughter of the executed if you Adam. Part 2. The engineer's revenge. Marcus Chen floated in the maintenance shaft of the hegemony dreadnought Void Serpent, his tools carefully arranged in the zero-gravity workspace around him. The soft hum of the ship's fusion reactors provided a steady rhythm as he worked, but his mind was far from the routine conduit repairs that served as his cover. 3 months of playing the role of a captured human engineer had brought him deep into the heart of the enemy fleet, and tonight, his patience would finally pay dividends. The memory of his sister Lily's execution still burned in his chest like molten metal. She had been a medical student, barely 22, whose only crime was treating wounded resistance fighters. The hegemony had made an example of her, broadcasting her trial and execution across human space with their characteristic brutality. Marcus had watched from his hiding place in the asteroid belt, powerless to save her, as they accused her of crimes against Imperial security and ended her life with clinical efficiency. Human worker, came a voice through the comm system, speaking in the broken English that most Draconian soldiers used when addressing their captives. Report status of power coupling repairs. Marcus keyed his calm with practiced subservience. Almost complete, honored overseer. The plasma flow irregularities should be resolved within the hour. What he didn't mention was that those irregularities were his own handiwork. Carefully introduced microfractures in the containment matrix that would cause cascading failures throughout the ship's primary systems. It was delicate work, requiring an intimate understanding of both human and Draconian engineering principles. But Marcus had always been gifted with machines. His sister used to joke that he could make a broken hyperdrive sing opera if he put his mind to it. The irony wasn't lost on him that his captors valued his skills so highly. The hegemony's rapid expansion had outpaced their ability to train sufficient technical personnel, making skilled human engineers valuable assets rather than simple slaves. They treated him well enough, better rations, private quarters, even access to their technical databases. They saw him as a useful tool, never suspecting that every system he repaired came with hidden surprises waiting to activate. Chen, called another voice, this one belonging to his Draconian supervisor, Subcommander Tice. Unlike most of the military personnel, Tice spoke excellent English and had shown something approaching professional respect for Marcus's abilities. I need you to examine the quantum resonance chamber in Section 7. The harmonic frequencies have been fluctuating. Marcus gathered his tools and began making his way through the ship's maintenance network. The Void Serpent was a marvel of engineering, nearly 2 kilometers of sleek death designed to crack planets like eggs. But every marvel had its weaknesses, and Marcus had spent months learning exactly where this particular ship was vulnerable. The quantum resonance chamber was the heart of the ship's faster-than-light drive, a crystalline structure that manipulated spacetime through controlled harmonic vibrations. As Marcus approached the chamber, he couldn't help but admire the elegant fusion of Draconian and captured human technology. The hegemony was nothing if not practical. They had no qualms about adopting useful innovations from their conquered enemies. The problem appears to be in the primary resonance matrix, Marcus reported as Tice joined him in the cramped chamber. Some kind of sympathetic vibration is throwing off the harmonic balance. Tice examined the readouts with the focused intensity that Marcus had come to associate with Draconian engineers. Despite everything, he had developed a grudging respect for the aliens' technical competence. In another life, under different circumstances, they might have been colleagues rather than captor and captive. Can you compensate for the fluctuations? Tice asked. Easily, Marcus replied, already connecting his diagnostic equipment to the control matrix. But I'd recommend a full system recalibration. Once we reach the next port, these kinds of harmonic distortions can cascade if left unchecked. What Marcus didn't mention was that he had been carefully introducing those distortions over the past weeks, creating a complex pattern of resonance instabilities that would peak at exactly the right moment. When the time came, a simple triggered pulse would turn the ship's own quantum drive into a massive bomb dot. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about the conversation he'd overheard the night before. A group of young Draconian engineers had been discussing the news from Research Station Theta, something about a human translator who had convinced an entire hegemony patrol to question their orders. The details were sketchy, but the reaction among the crew had been fascinating. Some dismissed it as propaganda, but others seemed genuinely intrigued by the possibility of peaceful contact with humans. "Tice," Marcus said carefully as he made the final adjustments to the resonance matrix. "May I ask you something?" The Draconian's golden eyes fixed on him with curiosity. "Speak." "Your people conquered my world, enslaved or killed most of my species, and you treat the survivors as useful animals. But you've always been professional with me, even respectful. Why?" Tice was quiet for a long moment, his scaled fingers drumming against the chamber's bulkhead in a rhythm Marcus had learned. Indicated deep thought. "You wish to understand the mind of your enemy?" Tice asked finally. "I wish to understand the mind of someone who builds beautiful machines, but uses them to destroy worlds." Another silence stretched between them when Tice spoke again. His voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't heard before. "I am an engineer, Chen. I love the elegant solution, the perfect fusion of form and function. This ship, it is a work of art, a testament to what intelligent beings can create when they apply their minds to a problem." He paused, his gaze fixed on the crystalline heart of the quantum drive. "But every time I see it in action, watching it rain death on defenseless planets, I wonder if perhaps we have become too efficient at solving the wrong problems." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "Then why do you serve?" "Because I am Draconian. Because my clutch brothers died in the last war against the Vorlaxian collective, and the hegemony promised that conquest would bring peace. Because I believed that strength and unity were the only paths to survival in a hostile galaxy." Tice turned to meet Marcus's eyes directly. "Because I was young and foolish and thought that superior technology made us superior beings, and now I work alongside a human engineer whose sister was executed for showing mercy to wounded enemies, and I find myself questioning everything I thought I knew about strength and honor." The admission hung in the air between them like a live wire. Marcus realized he was holding his breath, afraid that any movement might shatter this moment of unexpected honesty. "You know about Lily," Marcus whispered. "I reviewed your file when you were assigned to my section. I read the reports of her trial, watched the recordings of her execution." Tice's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "She was brave, Chen. She faced death with more dignity than most warriors I have known." Tears Marcus had been holding back for months threatened to spill over. "She was everything good about humanity, everything worth protecting." "Yes," Tice agreed quietly. "And we killed her because she inconvenienced our war machine." They worked in silence for several minutes, the weight of shared grief and regret filling the chamber. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice was steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "The resonance matrix is stable now. But Tice, when the time comes, when this ship is used to murder more innocents, like my sister, will you be able to live with yourself?" Tice didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled up a holographic display showing the ship's current mission parameters. Marcus's blood ran cold as he read the target coordinates: New Geneva, a human agricultural colony with over 2 million civilians. 46 hours, Tice said quietly. "That's when we arrive at your people's colony, when these beautiful machines I've helped to build will begin raining death on farms and schools and hospitals." Marcus felt the familiar rage building in his chest, but this time it was tempered by something else: hope. "It doesn't have to happen." "What are you saying?" Marcus looked directly into Tice's golden eyes. "I'm saying that an engineer as skilled as you would know exactly how to disable the ship's weapon systems without triggering any of the automated failsafes. And an engineer as principled as you seem to be might find that preferable to participating in genocide. That would be treason. That would be choosing to solve the right problem for once." They stared at each other across the quantum resonance chamber, the crystalline heart of the ship pulsing with contained energies that could power a small city, or reduce it to atoms. Two engineers from enemy species, united by their love of elegant solutions and their growing horror at the uses to which their talents had been put. If I were to hypothetically consider such an action, Tice said slowly, I would need assurance that it wouldn't simply delay the inevitable. Other ships in the fleet could complete the mission. Marcus smiled grimly. Leave that to me. I've been very busy these past few months, and this isn't the only ship in the fleet with mysteriously unstable resonance matrices. Tice's eyes widened. As the implication sank in, you've sabotaged the entire battle group. I've introduced carefully calculated instabilities into 17S. Part 3. The pilot's defiance. Zara Okafor's fingers danced across the control console of her modified cargo hauler Starrunner as she watched the hegemony convoy. Through her ship's passive sensors, 3 massive transport vessels escorted by a pair of sleek interceptors, carrying what her intelligence contacts claimed was experimental technology that could turn the tide of the war, the kind of prize that could justify the insane risk she was about to take. Her brother Kofi's voice echoed in her memory as she made final preparations for the attack. Promise me, Zara, if something happens to me, don't let them turn you into something you're not. Stay human, no matter what they do to us. Those had been his last words before the hegemony bombardment of New Lagos, where he'd been serving as a civilian evacuation coordinator. The official report said the transport he'd been loading with refugee children had taken a direct hit from orbital plasma cannons. There hadn't been enough left to bury. Phoenix Wing, this is Starrunner. Zara transmitted on the encrypted resistance frequency. Beginning approach on the convoy. All teams ready. Copy that, Starrunner, came the reply from her wingman, a grizzled ex-military pilot named Torres. Been waiting for this dance all week. Zara had assembled a strike team of 6 ships fast attack craft and modified civilian vessels crewed by pilots who had lost everything to the hegemony. They called themselves the Void Hawks, and their reputation for impossible missions had grown legendary among the scattered resistance. Cells, remember, Zara said as they began their attack run, we need those transports intact. Whatever's in their cargo holds could be the key to finally hitting back at these bastards effectively. The convoy was moving through the asteroid belt of the Zirian system, using the rocky debris as cover while they transported their mysterious cargo to a forward base. It was risky territory for large ships, requiring skilled navigation to avoid collision with the drifting rocks. Perfect hunting ground for pirate-saur resistance fighters. Contact, Torres reported as the hegemony sensors finally detected their approach. 2 interceptors breaking formation to engage. Zara's heart rate spiked as she got her first clear look at the enemy fighters. They were beautiful in their deadliness, swept-wing predators, with plasma cannons that could vaporize her cargo hauler with a single sustained burst. But she had advantages they didn't: intimate knowledge of this asteroid field, a ship modified for maximum maneuverability, and absolutely nothing left to lose. All ships, scatter pattern Delta, she ordered, throwing the Starrunner into a spiraling dive that used a massive asteroid's gravity well to slingshot her toward the enemy formation. Make them work for it. The space around her erupted in brilliant flashes of plasma fire as the hegemony interceptors engaged. One of her pilots, a young woman named Singh, screamed over the comm as her ship took a glancing hit that sent her spinning out of control. But the resistance fighters were veterans of 100 impossible battles, and they adapted quickly to the enemy's tactics. Got a lock, Torres called out as he lined up on one of the interceptors. His modified mining laser carved through the enemy ship's shields like a blade through paper, and the Draconian fighter exploded in a brilliant fireball. But the second interceptor was better piloted, weaving through the asteroid field with fluid grace that spoke of years of combat experience. Zara found herself in a deadly dance with the alien ace, both ships using the drifting rocks as cover and weapons in equal measure. Unknown resistance pilot, came a voice over an open channel, speaking in accented but excellent English. I am Flight Commander Varix of the Crimson Wing. You fly with considerable skill. Zara blinked in surprise. Enemy pilots rarely bothered with communication during combat, especially not compliments to their opponents. "Thanks for the professional courtesy," she replied, rolling her ship under a spinning asteroid the size of a city block. "But I'm still going to blow you out of space." "An understandable sentiment," Varix replied, his tone almost conversational despite the deadly plasma bolts they were exchanging. "Might I inquire what drives such determination?" "The cargo we carry is of minimal strategic value." "Minimal strategic value?" Zara's voice turned cold as she remembered the children's evacuation transport. "Everything you bastards carry is soaked in human blood. That makes it plenty valuable to me." There was a pause in the alien pilot's fire, long enough that Zara managed to get a visual lock on his interceptor. As it emerged from behind a cluster of metallic asteroids, the ship was sleek and predatory, its hull marked with the elaborate, scarring patterns that indicated a veteran pilot of many victories. "I see," Varix said quietly. "You have suffered losses at our hands." "My brother," Zara replied, lining up for a shot that would end this conversation permanently. "New Lagos, 3 months ago. He was loading children onto an evacuation transport when your people decided to make sure there were no witnesses." Her finger hesitated on the firing control as Varix's ship suddenly stopped evading, hanging motionless in space like a perfect target. On any other day, she would have taken the shot without hesitation, but something in the alien pilot's silence made her wait. "New Lagos," Varix repeated, and Zara could hear something that sounded almost like pain in his voice. "I was there. I flew in that bombardment." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. This creature, this enemy ace who complimented her flying and spoke to her like an equal, had been there when Kofi died, had possibly been the one to fire the shots that murdered her brother. "And those children, then you're going to die slowly," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps," Varix agreed. "But first, I must tell you something. The transport your brother was loading, it was not supposed to be a target. Our orders were to strike military installations only. The pilot who fired on civilian evacuees acted against direct commands." Zara's targeting system painted Varix's interceptor in red, indicating a perfect firing solution. One squeeze of the trigger would vaporize the alien, who had just admitted to being part of the force that killed her family. But his words had thrown her off balance. "What happened to that pilot?" she asked. "Executed for crimes against honor." Varix replied immediately. "By my own hand, on orders from our battle leader. The hegemony may be your enemy, but we are not supposed to be monsters." The conversation was interrupted by Torz's urgent transmission. "Zara, we've breached the transport hulls. You need to see what's in here." Zara kept her weapons trained on Varix's ship while she accessed the video feed from her wingman's suit camera. What she saw made her blood run cold. The transport holds weren't filled with weapons or military technology. They were packed with children, human children, hundreds of them, kept in some kind of suspended animation. "Dear God," she breathed. "They're just kids. The cargo you seek," Varix said quietly, apparently monitoring the same channel. "It is not weapons or technology. They are specimens for the hegemony's biological research programs." The rage that filled Zara then was different from anything she had ever experienced. It was cold and pure and absolutely lethal. "You're experimenting on children." "Not I," Varix said quickly. "I transport them, yes, but under sealed orders. Until this moment, I believed they were being relocated to safer worlds, away from the fighting. And now I understand why you fight with such desperation. Now I see what we have become in the name of empire." Zara stared at her targeting display, finger poised over the firing control. Every instinct screamed at her to destroy this enemy, to make him pay for his part in the hegemony's crimes. But Kofi's voice echoed in her memory. "Don't let them turn you into something you're not." "Flight Commander Varix," she said finally, her decision made. "I'm going to make you an offer. Help us get these children to safety, and I'll let you live long enough to start making amends for what your people have done." The silence stretched between them for long seconds. When Varix finally responded, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "You would trust me. After everything, trust is earned," Zara replied. "But everyone deserves a chance to choose who they wanted to be." Even Draconian aces who've been flying on the wrong side of a genocide. The transport ships have. Skeleton. Crews, Varix said slowly. If we disable their engines, instead of destroying them, we could take them intact, but there will be other patrols, other interceptors coming to investigate when we fail to report in. Let me worry about that, Zara said, finally taking her finger off the firing control. Can you get us past the automated defenses on those transports? Yes, but once I do this, there's no going back. I will be marked as a traitor to the hegemony, hunted by my own people. Zara thought of her brother, of the children in those transport holds, of all the countless innocents who had died because good people chose to follow orders instead of. Conscience, welcome to the resistance, Flight Commander, she said. Hope you're ready to learn what it really means to fight for something. As they began coordinating their approach to the transport vessels, Zara felt a strange sensation in her chest. For the first time since Kofi's death, she was fighting not just for revenge, but for the possibility of redemption. Not just hers, but for an enemy pilot who had chosen to remember what honor really meant. The pilot's defiance would be measured not in ships destroyed or enemies killed, but in the lives saved. Part 4. The scientists discovered David Reyes stood in the abandoned observatory on Kepler 440b, surrounded by the ghosts of his former life. The quantum equations covering every available surface told the story of 3 years of obsessive work, a weapon that could tear holes in spacetime itself, turning the hegemony's own faster-than-light travel against them. But tonight, as he stared at the final calculations that would make his revenge possible, all he could think about was Isabella's laugh. His wife had been a xenobiologist, fascinated by the possibility of communication with alien species. Even after the first hegemony attacks, she had maintained that peaceful contact was possible, that the universal language of science could bridge any cultural divide. The irony that her own scientific curiosity had led to her capture and eventual death in a hegemony research facility was not lost on him. The laboratory door chimed softly, indicating someone had bypassed his security systems. David's hand moved instinctively to the plasma pistol at his hip, but he forced himself to remain calm. Very few people knew about this hidden facility, and even fewer had the technical skills to break through his defenses. Dr. Reyes, the voice, was female, speaking English with a slight accent he couldn't immediately place. I am unarmed. I wish to speak with you about your work. David turned slowly, his hands still resting on his weapon. The figure standing in his doorway was humanoid, but clearly alien tall and willowy, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her large, dark eyes held an intelligence that reminded him painfully of Isabella. You're Draconian, he said, though even as the words left his mouth he realized they weren't quite accurate. This being shared some characteristics with the reptilian conquerors, but her features were more delicate, more refined. Zephyrian, she corrected gently. I am Dr. Naya Velter, formerly of the hegemony's Advanced Sciences Division. I have come to warn you that your weapon will not accomplish what you hope. David's grip tightened on his pistol. You're with them, the ones who killed my wife. I was, Naya admitted, stepping carefully into the laboratory with her hands visible and empty. But I am no longer. 3 months ago, I was assigned to examine the research data taken from captured human scientists. Among those files, I found the work of Dr. Isabella Reyes. The name hit David like a physical blow. He had spent 3 years trying to forget the details of Isabella's capture, the reports of her death in a hegemony laboratory. Hearing her name, spoken by one of the aliens responsible for her fate, filled him with rage. So pure it took his breath away. Don't, he whispered, drawing his weapon fully. Don't you dare speak her name. She was brilliant, Naya continued, seemingly unperturbed by the weapon pointed at her chest. Her theories on quantum consciousness, the possibility of minds existing across multiple dimensional states, they were revolutionary. But more than that, she was kind, even in captivity. Even knowing she would die, she tried to teach us. She believed that understanding could triumph over hatred. And then you killed her anyway, David said, his voice breaking. Yes, Naya replied simply. And that act of ignorance, of waste, is why I am here. Your wife's work changed me, Dr. Reyes. It showed me that the hegemony's path leads only to emptiness. So I took her research, and yours, and I fled. David stared at the alien scientist, trying to process what she was telling him. You have Isabella's work. I have everything, Naya said, reaching slowly into a satchel at her side. Her notes on quantum consciousness, her theories about interdimensional communication, even her personal journal entries. She pulled out a data pad and set it carefully on a nearby table, including her final message. David's hand shook as he reached for the device. Isabella's face appeared on the screen, older and thinner than he remembered, but still beautiful, still alive. At least when this recording was made. My dearest David, Isabella's recorded voice said, and he had to bite back a sob. If you're seeing this, then I'm gone, and you're probably planning something terrible in response. I know you, my love. I know how your mind works when you're angry and brilliant and convinced that the universe has treated you unfairly. David sank into a chair, the weapon forgotten in his lap as he listened to his dead wife's words. But I need you to know something before you let your grief consume you. The draconian scientists here, they're not monsters. They're scared, David, terrified, that their empire is built on a foundation of brutality they can't escape. Some of them wanted to find another way, but they don't know how. Don't let my death be the end of the conversation we started. Please. The recording ended, leaving David staring at the blank screen. When he finally looked up, Naya was watching him with an expression of profound sadness. She spoke of you often. The alien scientist said quietly. She believed that if anyone could find a way to weaponize quantum mechanics, it would be her brilliant husband. But she also believed that if anyone could find a way to heal the wounds between our species, it would be that same brilliant man. The weapon, David said hoarsely, it's nearly complete. One more week, maybe two, and I could tear their entire fleet out of spacetime, and this war in a single stroke, and kill millions of beings who are just as trapped in this cycle of violence as you are. Naya replied, including the scientists and engineers who are beginning to question everything they've been taught, including the young pilots who refuse to fire on civilian targets, including the scholars who risk execution to preserve human art and literature because they believe it has value. David looked around his laboratory at the equations that represented 3 years of consuming grief and brilliant madness. Then, what do you suggest? That I just forget what they did to her? Pretend that justice doesn't matter? I suggest that we honor your wife's memory by finishing what she started, Naya said, moving to examine the quantum equations covering the walls. Your weapon works by destabilizing the quantum foam that allows faster-than-light travel, but with slight modifications. The same principles could be used to create stable interdimensional communication networks. Imagine being able to speak instantaneously across any distance, to share knowledge and ideas without the need for conquest or control. David stood and joined her at the wall of equations, seeing his work with fresh eyes. It's elegant, he admitted, but it would require tremendous computational power to maintain stability across multiple dimensional matrices. Computational power that the hegemony possesses, Naya said, and which they might be willing to share if offered something they value more than weapons. Such as hope, Naya replied simply. A path forward that doesn't end in mutual annihilation. A chance to become something better than conquerors and rebels locked in an endless cycle of revenge. They worked together through the night. To scientists from enemy species finding common ground in the elegant language of mathematics, David found himself admiring Naya's insights. The way her alien perspective illuminated solutions he had never considered. More than that, he found himself remembering why he had fallen in love with science in the first place. Not for its potential to destroy, but for its power to reveal the hidden connections that bound all things together. As dawn broke over Kepler-4 alien landscape, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, David made his decision. The communication array, he said, pointing to a section of modified equations. If we can build a prototype, demonstrate that instantaneous communication across galactic distances is possible, it might be enough to bring both sides to the negotiating table. It won't be easy, Naya warned. There are factions on both sides that profit from this war. that will resist any attempt at peace. Isabella always said that the hardest problems were the ones most worth solving, David replied. He looked at the alien scientist who had risked everything to bring him his wife's final message, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years' hope. Besides, I think I'm going to need a research partner interested in the position, Dr. Velter. Naya's features shifted in what he was learning to recognize as the Zephyrian equivalent of a smile. I thought you would never ask, Dr. Reyes, as they began the delicate work of transforming a weapon of mass destruction into an instrument of communication and understanding. David felt Isabella's presence in the laboratory with them, not as a ghost demanding vengeance, but as a reminder that love and curiosity were more powerful than hatred and fear. The scientist's discovery would not be measured in enemies destroyed, but in the bridges built between minds that had thought, themselves forever separated by the void of space and the barriers of prejudice. In choosing creation over destruction, David had found a way to honor his wife's memory while building the future she had believed possible. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and perhaps it was time for two species to stop fighting long enough to explore them together. Part 5. The ambassador's choice. Amira Hassan stood on the observation deck of the neutral station Harmony, watching the diplomatic shuttle Concordia dock with the grace of a dancer. 3 years ago, she had been Earth's chief ambassador to the Centauri colonies, a career diplomat skilled in navigating the complex politics of human space. Now, she was humanity's last hope for peace, chosen not for her political connections, but for her reputation as someone who could find common ground where others saw only conflict. The past months had been a whirlwind of impossible victories. Elena Vasquez had proven that Draconian soldiers could be turned from their purpose through understanding rather than force. Marcus Chen and his Draconian partner Tice had saved an entire human colony through an act of mutual betrayal that had become legendary. Zara Okafor's rescue of hundreds of children had shown both species that honor could transcend the boundaries of war, and David Reyes had turned his weapon of vengeance into a beacon of hope that promised instantaneous communication across the galaxy. But all of those victories would mean nothing if the formal peace negotiations failed, if Amira couldn't find a way to bridge the gap between species that had been trying to destroy each other for 5 years. Ambassador Hassan, her aide, Lieutenant Johnson, approached with a data pad in hand. The hegemony delegation has arrived. Their lead negotiator is, he paused, checking his notes with obvious discomfort, Prince Kaeldus of the Third Royal House, heir to the imperial throne. Amira felt her stomach tighten. She had been expecting career diplomats or military commanders, not royalty. Negotiating with a prince would add layers of complexity she hadn't anticipated, questions of honor, prestige, and succession politics that could derail talks before they began. What do we know about him? She asked, accepting the data pad and scrolling through the intelligence files. 34 years old by human standards, educated at the Imperial Academy, considered one of their finest strategic minds. But here's the interesting part: he's been pushing for military reforms within the hegemony, arguing for more selective engagement and protection of civilian populations. Some sources suggest he was behind the recent purges of commanders who targeted non-combatants. Amira studied the prince's image, tall and imposing like all Draconians, but with an intelligent face, marked by what appeared to be premature scarring along his jaw and neck, battle wounds or ritual markings. She couldn't tell from the photo any family connections to our recent converts. Sub-Commander Tice is his second cousin, Johnson replied, and Flight Commander Varix was apparently his flight instructor. At the academy, the prince personally intervened to prevent Varix's execution after the new Centauri incident. The pieces were beginning to form a picture that both encouraged and terrified Amira. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission, it was a meeting between the human, who had become the symbol of their species' resilience, and the Draconian prince who might hold the key to his empire's future. Ma'am, Johnson continued, there's something else. The prince requested that these talks be conducted without the usual diplomatic protocols. No formal ceremony, no recording devices, no advisors. He wants to speak with you directly. Amira nodded. though her mouth had gone dry. In her experience, such requests usually meant one of two things. Either the other party was planning something underhanded, or they were about to reveal information so sensitive that standard diplomatic channels couldn't handle it. An hour later, she found herself in Conference Room Alpha, a neutral space designed to accommodate both human and draconian physiology. The room was larger than necessary, with high ceilings and minimal decoration, nothing that might give either side a psychological advantage. Prince Kael'thas entered alone, moving with the fluid grace she had learned to associate with draconian nobility. But up close, she could see that the scars on his face were recent, and the way he favored his left side suggested injuries that hadn't fully healed. "Ambassador Hassan," he said in perfect, unaccented English, "thank you for agreeing to meet. Under these unusual circumstances, Your Highness," Amira replied, offering a slight bow that acknowledged his rank without suggesting subservience. "I must admit, I was expecting a larger delegation, as was I," Kael'thas admitted, settling into a chair that groaned under his weight. "But recent events have convinced me that traditional diplomatic approaches will not serve us well. Too much has changed. Too many assumptions have been proven false." Amira took her own seat across from him, studying his expression for clues to his intentions. "You're referring to the recent defections among your forces. I'm referring to the revelation that my empire has been built on lies," Kael'thas said bluntly. "For 5 years, we have been told that humans are a plague species that must be contained or eliminated, that your people are incapable of honor, mercy, or higher reasoning. Yet in recent months, I have watched human engineers and draconian soldiers work together to save lives. I have seen human pilots risk everything to rescue children they had never met. I have read reports of human scientists choosing to build communication networks instead of weapons of mass destruction." The prince paused, his golden eyes meeting hers directly. "And I have been forced to confront the possibility that the monsters in this war are not who I thought they were." Amira felt a flicker of hope, but she had been a diplomat long enough to know that personal revelations didn't always translate into political action. "What you're describing sounds like the beginning of wisdom, Your Highness, but wisdom and policy are often different things." "Indeed," Kael'thas agreed. "Which brings me to why I requested this private meeting, Ambassador Hassan. I am not here as the hegemony's negotiator. I am here as someone who is considering treason against everything I was raised to believe." The words hung in the air between them like a live explosive. Amira kept her expression carefully neutral, but her mind was racing through the implications. If the imperial heir was contemplating rebellion against his own government, it could either represent the greatest opportunity for peace in generations, or the most elaborate trap ever set. "That's a dangerous confession to make to an enemy diplomat," she said carefully. "You are not my enemy," Kael'thas replied. "My enemies are the ones who convinced me that conquest was the only path to survival, the ones who taught me that strength meant the ability to destroy rather than the wisdom to preserve." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "My enemies are the ones who have turned my people into a plague upon the galaxy." Amira studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. Instead, she saw something that reminded her of her own reflection in the days after Earth's fall, the haunted look of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered. "What do you propose?" she asked. "An end to this war, but not through the USUAL channels. A new paradigm that recognizes what we have learned from recent events, that our species are stronger together than apart, that understanding is more powerful than conquest, that the future belongs to those who can build rather than those who can only destroy. Your government would never agree to such terms." "My government," Kael'thas said with a bitter laugh, "consists of aging warlords who see every problem as a target to be destroyed. They would indeed never agree, which is why I propose that we bypass them entirely." Amira felt her heart rate spike. "You're talking about a coup. I'm talking about evolution." Kael'thas corrected. "The hegemony is dying, Ambassador. Our expansion has outpaced our ability to govern effectively. Our military is plagued by defections and moral crises. Our younger generation questions everything their elders taught them. The old ways are failing, and clinging to them will destroy us all. And you believe you can change things?" I believe we can change things, he said, emphasizing the plural. This cannot be a draconian solution imposed on human space, nor a human solution imposed on the hegemony. It must be something new, something that neither of our species has attempted before. Almira leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. In her wildest dreams, she hadn't imagined that these negotiations might lead to a fundamental restructuring of galactic politics. What exactly are you proposing? A confederation, Kael'thas said, pulling out a data pad and sliding it across the table. Human and draconian worlds governed by their own people according to their own cultures, but united in common cause, shared technology, shared resources, shared defense against external threats. The Zephyrians, the Vorlaxians, other species who have been caught between us, they could join as equals, rather than conquered subjects. Almira scrolled through the detailed proposal, her amazement growing with each page. This wasn't the desperate scheme of idealistic prince, it was a comprehensive political and economic framework that addressed everything from trade regulations to military command structures. This would require you to give up your claim to the imperial throne, she observed. The imperial throne is a relic of a failed philosophy, Kael'thas replied. I would rather be remembered as the prince who helped birth a new age than as the emperor who presided over the collapse of an old one. And if your people resist, if they see this as betrayal rather than evolution. Kael'thas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the conference room's viewpo.